Mark Gough, Global Environmental Manager of Reed Elsevier and Chair of the Environmental Action Group of the publishing industry. Welcome to the London Book Fair podcast. Now, before the great crash of 2008, publishers were very gung-ho about their environmental concerns, indeed seemed almost to be competing for green credentials. Have the events of the last couple of years changed some of that?
I don't think necessarily that the publishers were gung-ho about things. I think that, as with most things, when you start something new, there's a lot of enthusiasm, there's a lot of passion and ideas, and I think that some of the publishers probably did say things that they maybe regret now. As for the last couple of years and the difference that the financial downturn has had, I think that there has been definitely a lot more work for people to do, and the people that have been involved with this process have found themselves being pulled in several directions and haven't necessarily been able to give as much time to the environmental initiatives as they used to. But I think it actually has been embedded enough within the organisations that it is still there as one of the core attributes of the publishing industry.
Now, President Obama, of course, told us that the green agenda helped create jobs. But here in Britain, we're not terribly disposed towards the Keynesian view of things. How about publishers? Aren't they just really concerned about the price of the finished product?
Price is always going to be part of the issue. And if you go back to the definition of what sustainable development is, it basically includes the economic factors. So it includes finance, it includes social, and it includes environment. And the whole thing about this is about trying to get the balance between the three. So we can't go on without making a profit. That's not going to happen. So profit is always going to be part of the issue, but it's balancing that with the correct environmental issues and social issues at the same time. I think that some companies have got that better than others. I think that there's a lot more people like me now in organisations whose job it is to try and help that balance. And I think that we're getting better at getting it correct. There is still a long way to go though, and I think that we're definitely not at a point where we are working towards complete sustainability. I would actually argue it's not possible to be completely sustainable, it's actually a road.
There was a BML survey in summer 2008 which suggested that book buyers were more than usually aware of green issues and that environmental issues indeed might affect their buying decisions. They were very concerned that books were bad for the environment, in short. Does that view still prevail, and has it stirred publishers into action, do you think?
They've influenced the process, but I think it's actually a lot of it is being led by the publishers themselves. At the moment, we're not doing things just because we expect readers to want them. If we were doing that, I think that any business in the end would probably not succeed. So there's got to be a balance between listening to your customers and consumers and also doing what you think is right. But it's definitely influencing the debate, yes.
Now, books are sort of inherently ungreen, I suppose, because they use paper which use trees and so on and water. But are e-books inevitably greener than the traditional sort?
I love this idea that whenever you think of a piece of paper, what you actually see is you see a hillside being cleared of trees, and the whole idea of the industry with paper is that we're cutting down trees. Actually, in the last century or so, there's more trees being grown for paper and actually absorbing carbon all the time they're growing than there were 40 or 50 years ago. I think that in the end, it's got to come down to no matter what format you're producing in, you're trying to be as efficient and as sustainable as possible. We're not going to move away from this direction towards online and ebooks, etc. That's going to happen. But to get into an argument about which one is better, I think is missing the point, really. Paper is a wonderful product. If it was designed today, it would be the next best thing, because it can be recycled reuse it 7 times.
So it's like water in London, where we've drunk the glass 7 times, is it?
Yeah. So I do think that the debate over which is better, it's great for dinner parties, knowing that there is 10 litres of water in every A4 piece of paper. But actually, how does that actually really impact our lives, and how's that really connected to the holistic nature of what we're doing? Carbon footprinting and all of this gives us some indication for the company so that we can help to improve our processes. But I don't think should be a decision-making tool for producing new products.
But of course the problem with e-reading devices, and this is not exclusive to the publishing industry, we all get rid of our mobile phones, our computers, every other gizmo we have every couple of years when something new comes along, and then we send them to the third world to be taken apart or dumped as landfill. That's much more of a problem than books, isn't it?
And the heavy metals have got to be mined in the first place, which is a very intensive process. You also have the fact with some paper products, if you include the carbon that is being absorbed by the trees in the first place, you could actually say that it's being carbon positive to buy a book. So, I mean, this is getting very, very complicated. You're totally right. It's not an easy thing to say. You can't say that basically online is better than paper. Both have impacts, and both of them we need to address.
Now, of course, publishers themselves are not inherently green. In fact, they've had a rather large carbon footprint. I mean, they like fancy cars, they have chauffeur-driven limos quite often, they take taxis rather than public transport, they fly to meetings and sale conferences. How are they doing? Have they reduced their carbon footprint? Are we seeing much more video conferencing, for example, which I suppose is also due in part to the recession?
Video conferencing is making a big difference. At Reed Elsevier here, we've had over 10,000 video conference calls in the last year, which is a massive amount, saved 3,500 tonnes of carbon.
Now, what about book fairs themselves? Most Britons still fly to Frankfurt, even though soon it'll be very easy to get the train. And the increasing numbers of fairs around the world means there's often no alternative to flying.
Once again, I would probably disagree with you there. It depends on, you have to look at these things holistically. If you look at just the travel impacts of going to a show, the figure that comes out is very high. It's probably the biggest impact of running a show is getting all the people there. But if you looked at that one person and where they were going to go to meet all of the people that they were going to meet at that conference, they would do an awful lot more travel. And this very much became obvious after the volcano incident at last year's London Book Fair. We're actually talking to people on the committee afterwards. It was clear that they had to do more travelling and sign off on more travel for their employees to meet the same people. So the impact was greater. And actually running an exhibition, you bring people together where they can do and learn so much together. It's never going to move into a completely virtual world. Book deals are always going to be done face to face, I think. And somewhere like the London Book Fair is a meeting place as much as an exhibition show.
Now, what about shipping, for example? I mean, obviously, we're quite often, as an industry, printing books in the Far East. They've got to be shipped back to the UK or the US. Sometimes they cross an ocean more than once, we're told. Are publishers much more aware of those kind of issues now when they plan their schedules?
Logistical management is definitely making improvements, but that's just a sign of efficiency, which all businesses should be doing anyway, and isn't necessarily just around sustainability. It's part of that strand, but it's definitely making a big step forward. Also, the move to digital printing, moving away from litho to digital printing, is making an impact. Print on demand is making an impact as well. The Guardian newspaper at the moment is doing some great work looking at some of the information around where they're getting their paper from. So this is starting to come in through to our decision making now around not just the financial impacts but the non-financial impacts as well.
Of course, the problem in a way is the terms themselves of green and sustainable, because for a lot of people that simply conjures up an image of a tree hugger or an environmental protester in his hoodie or whatever. Do we need to change the terminology to make it more understandable and the issue more approachable to people on both sides of the argument? Completely.
I think that there's lots of issues around how we communicate the issues that we're talking about. As you say, a green campaigner with all the combat boots or a cuddly tree hugger. They're the sort of images of what we're doing here, and yet I'm sitting here today in a suit working for a big organisation and helping them to be greener. So I think we do have to be careful about how we term things, and I don't think we've probably got off onto the right foot. We're either talking about things in scientific terms, CO2, CH4, this. I mean, that means nothing to the average user. Or we're talking in doomsday terms. So we're saying the world's going to end. Or we're preaching and saying, you must do this, which is, I never react well to being told what I should or shouldn't do. So I think we do have to look at the way that we're addressing this and whether the term green or environmental sustainability is the right term really to bring everyone along. In the end, I think it comes down to a very personal issue as well. It's really about how we respect ourselves, all of this issue. It's how we respect others. It's also how we respect the planet. And actually maybe respect would be a better term than green.
Mark Gough, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.